There are provinces in this country that are one tragedy away from losing outdoor learning,
Uh,
losing all the progress that was made since, let's say, the pandemic hit and people were like, I need to go outside. And that's not okay. Like, we need to create something more resilient than cross your fingers and hope for the best.
I'm excited to have this conversation. My guest. Now you're gonna have to say your full name for me so I don't say it wrong because I'll probably butcher it if I try it. You're Franz, and how do you say your last name?
Well, I got good news for you. So I say my last name Planger, but the thing is, my name is a German name. I am from Quebec, so French is my first language, and now I speak in English, Alberta, English province all the
Oh,
time. So there are many ways to say my name that I've responded to in my life because
okay.
there are many ways to make it work. So Franz Planger is how I say it, but
Okay.
whichever way comes out from naturally for you is fine by me.
I was gonna say, do people say Planger?
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm very excited because I've been a member of the Outdoor Council of Canada for a while, and I have an interesting story as to how that happened and where that all came about. So I'm excited to both share that story and then, of course, find out more about the workings of the Outdoor Council of Canada and what its mission is, and essentially, I want the teachers that are going to watch this and the other people who will hear this podcast understand the role that it serves right now in outdoor education, because I think it's a big one. I think it's actually probably one of the biggest roles I can think of in giving that access. So I'm excited to hear what you have to tell me about this. So let's start with this. Tell me about your role in the OCC and what your job is basically at the OCC.
I am the executive director, which means that I'm responsible for essentially the implementation of our mission, and that the implementation happens in a way that is reaching maximal impact possible with our current resources, and then also creating the conditions where we accumulate resources to then increase our impact. The OCC is definitely an organization in a growth stage.
Mhm.
So the age of the organization is 14 years old. We're going to be 15 later this year. I feel like very much like we are teenagers in the
Mm.
sense that, at the teenage years, you are at the stage of defining yourself and really looking into that impact into the world and whatnot. With the OCC, there are similarities there. I feel like there's a lot of defining that happened in the like last 5 to 7 years, and now it's about concentrating and focusing on building on the impact and getting better and better at what we do. And ultimately, I'm responsible for making sure that all of that happens. I
Mhm.
might not be the one doing everything, but I'm the one building the plan with the team.
I should have warned you I was going to ask this question, but it's not really a gotcha question in any way. It's just a question I like asking everyone who is involved in the outdoors. I'm curious to hear this will be separate from the OCC. This is more, what's your story, how you got involved in the outdoors? What was the moment in your life where you kind of went, oh, this is I want to spend all of my time being involved in this industry because it's awesome. Do you have a story that, because everyone seems to have a
Yeah,
story that goes with that?
yeah,
I've got
yeah.
one of mine. I won't share it with you. I'm going to share it in an upcoming podcast, but I want to hear yours.
For me, it happened. So if I say Cégep, or you know what, maybe I'll explain it because maybe folks listening to this, not everybody knows what I mean. So in Quebec, where I grew up, there's high school and then there's university. But if you take the last year of high school and the first year in university and put them together,
Mhm.
um, that's what Cégep is.
Okay.
Technically, it's a college, but really, it's to either to prepare you to go to university or often to do trades related training or that type of stuff.
Mm.
So I was in Cégep. I was doing my studies to go to university to go into an engineering program.
Mm.
So I was doing my sciences degree in Cégep. You don't have to look much further than I come from an engineer family to know why I was doing engineering.
Mm.
So anyway, there was this optional course that is called the 18 jours éducation expérientielle, so 18 days experiential education. That course changed my life. So on the
Mm.
course, we start with 3 days of biking, and then I think it's 2 days of hiking, then like 4 days of canoeing, and then there's climbing, sea kayaking, solo, caving, big Rabasca canoe, jogging, and a bunch of other tidbits here and there. And it's all around experiential education. My life was going in one direction before the course, and it went in a totally different direction after the course. And that direction leads to today pretty directly. And then
Mm.
essentially, the course finished, and I was like, wow, that was very transformational for me. How can I share that transformation for other folks? And that significantly informed my decision, my desire to become an outdoor guide, which ultimately I became an instructor for Outward Bound Canada and
Mm-hmm.
other organizations of the type. And then, long story short, eventually I wanted to continue having an impact that was a bit broader than just within an organization or with students. So I was looking for an organization that was focused on something bigger, and the Outdoor Council of Canada was looking for somebody back in the days, and I applied, and the rest is history.
That's a great story. Oh, I like that. I find that fascinating that most people's stories seem to start in a certain age bracket. You're a teenager, or you're just leaving teenage years. That seems to be the key moment for a lot of people to have that transformation.
Yeah.
I was chatting with, because I had on this podcast, he said he knows you. He's the principal for Outward Bound, or he's a principal, Rob Wallace. And we were chatting about that exact thing, how young people are often, an excellent target for outdoor education and any programming around that. So that's fascinating. I think I'm going to find that trend no matter where I go, as most people will have discovered the outdoors during those formative years. I'll give you a little bit of background for why I want to have this conversation, because I think it's key knowing from my own perspective what brought me to Outward Bound. It doesn't really matter the year, but it's around 10 years ago. I was teaching in central Alberta,
Mm-hmm.
and I had started up a program where I would take students, grade 9 students, and we would go out into the David Thompson area.
Yeah.
And I had I jumped through every hoop I needed to at the time. I had checked off all the boxes. I had the person from the school division who had signed off on all of my safety protocols. I didn't have any ACMG certification because they weren't asking for it then. But I had people train me on how to set up ropes and rappelling and everything. And anyway, I ran this program, and it was just such an excellent program. Year after year, students were begging. They couldn't wait till they could go back to have grade 9 camp. We'd go out to the ice fields. We didn't go on the ice fields. We just, went to go see them. We went up hiking Wilcox Pass. Anyway, it was a really fantastic program. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, new school division shift, like a new superintendent. They start looking at, policies and stuff, and for good reason, wanting to make sure everything's done correctly. But it essentially shut it down. And it ended it in a way that was very troubling for me, because I could see the writing on the wall. I could see that it wouldn't matter how far I went with my certifications. They were going to say no anyways. I found that trend as I spoke with other outdoor professionals. This was kind of where everyone seemed to be going, was you have either you pay somebody else to run your entire program and you just kind of go hands off, or you just don't do it at all. That seemed to be what I was being told. I went to a teachers convention, and I just happened to stumble into a session on from the OCC, and what they were saying was exactly what I needed to hear. Now, I will say this: it didn't change anything with the school division I was working with at the time. That actually fell completely apart, and they put an end to any kind of camps that I was running at the time. It still bothered me. However, understanding how the OCC worked and how their programming functioned, I got the sense that the key was working with stakeholders and bringing everybody to the same table, so that we're all understanding what's going on. Changed my outlook because I was very cynical at that point. I was very like I was done with all of these kinds of things. The whole insurance companies running the show, because that's what had happened.
Yep.
Was it was the insurance company that said nothing, you can't do anything. And the school division went, okay, that's we'll take that, and there was no conversation happening whatsoever. I'm sure that's a common theme that you've heard. um my question now, because that was 10 years ago, maybe even further than that, I think it's longer than that, when that happened. I got involved with the OCC. I did my OCC field leader training, my instructor training as well, and I was able to make some headway there with a new school division. I moved to Jasper, and they were a lot less had less problems with outdoor stuff in Jasper, so it was much better there. How have things changed in that time period? Has the goal of the OCC changed? Because at the time it was a lot more, how do we make, bring stakeholders to the table? What's developed over time?
When I was hired about 10 years ago, I was hired as the curriculum specialist.
Mm,
Back then, my job was to look at the curriculum and the courses and whatnot. And actually, let me backtrack a little bit to the very early days and the pre-OCC days. The OCC was created out of two tragedies. So in 2001 and in 2003, there were two school groups in totally different places, different types of outdoor activities, where students died. And I won't go into the details. Suffice it to say that students died on school trips doing outdoor activities. The backlash in education program, in educational institutions in Alberta and elsewhere in the country was huge.
mhm,
And people from the outdoor community got together and decided to, long story short, it took a few years, but people
mhm,
got together and decided to create an organization called the Outdoor Council of Canada and to create a certification program that was particularly tailored for teachers or for summer camp counselors, so people working with youth, to be able to
mhm,
do good outdoor leadership. Over time, the languaging has evolved and whatnot. And today, I would say, like the field leader program, which is about outdoor leadership, if you apply that in a school context, really we're talking about classroom management outside.
mhm,
And those were not the words used back then, but essentially the thinking was the same. It's like we need to train people in classroom management outside so that students remain safe and the experiences remain quality educational experiences. So when I came in as curriculum specialist, there was the field leader program, and back then the language was very, very oriented towards people working with youth.
mhm,
Something that was pretty apparent to me is that really the principles taught in the course apply to anybody leading any other type of person in a natural environment.
mm,
So the course language, the concepts didn't really change, but the course language broadened so that you can be a volunteer club, you could be doing adventure therapy, can be doing guiding, and this outdoor leadership school course is still relevant.
mm,
And it shows nowadays. Our course is delivered in 13 post-secondary institutions. Some of them have nothing to do with training outdoor professionals. We have people that are certified in all types of outdoor programs. That's one type of expansion, but the general theme with the OCC has been expansion. Somewhere around 2019, we looked at how things were going. And the reality is that just having a certification program was not enough.
mm. Okay.
2 years earlier in Ontario, there was another tragedy in a school with a death that was 100% avoidable.
Mm,
In that province and across the country, outdoor education had a huge step back. Or took a huge step back, like significant in Ontario. I remember talking to a lot of outdoor educators that were worried that you would never see outdoor education in Ontario anymore, ever again.
that was in 2019.
2017 is when the
Oh,
death happened.
oh, okay, okay.
2019 is when we did our own internal reflection, which, we were like digesting the lessons that aged from since 2017. There you are, making an old cheese analogy here. Anyway, the point is, we realized that just being a certification body was not sufficient. We also needed to address structural barriers that are impacting outdoor programs, no matter what the type of program it is, whether it's educational, tourism, therapy, cultural rediscovery, whatever type of program that brings people on the land and offers some programmatic activity. The reason is that when you look at the practice of bringing people on the land, there's a significant amount of overlap, whether you do it in a school or you do it in a community center, let's say. A huge amount of overlap. And it's just overall the same community of practice. The going philosophy that we have is that if outdoor activities can become, I think the word in English is pervasive, like everywhere.
Yeah.
Then it is more likely that the different folks that are engaged with the school system will be open-minded and supportive of it. It's more likely that folks in the insurance industry are open-minded and supportive of it. And this hypothesis of ours is not just based on belief, although there's a good amount of that. It's also based on some other examples that we've seen elsewhere on the planet. Like when I like to speak of the example in Quebec. In Quebec, outdoor learning is definitely on the rise, and it's actually fully integrated within efforts of the Ministry of Education there.
Oh, wow.
And I'm simplifying the story for the sake of, the format of a podcast.
Yeah.
But we can say that all started because at some point in time, a high-level bureaucrat in the Ministry of Education was engaged in a conversation with folks from the like an outdoor association of some sort, and that person had kids at summer camp, and they could see how for their own kids going outside was really valuable. So there you go, you had a strong advocate within the provincial education system. And from there, it really, it just took off. It's incredible. I mean, the Ministry of Education in Quebec in 2018, I believe, published a document that speaks to the benefits of outdoor activities for Quebecois, which could be for Canadians. It's the same benefits no matter which province you're in. And again, as part of our reflection in 2019, where we're seeing, okay, 2017, tragedy, huge blowback. 2018, this document that has hundreds of references, super solid literature review published by the Ministry of Education next door. What's the difference? Well, the difference is what the piece I'm saying of addressing systemic barriers and representing the interests of the outdoor community and things like that. So today, the OCC has definitely broadened its scope at that level too. I'm pretty excited for what the future holds for us.
I think one of the things that I flew onto right away with the OCC is they have identified similar patterns that that creep up when there's no communication, right? There's a pattern of outdoor programmers that they start a program, it gets shut down, or there's not enough communication. And so they tend to try to hide it, or they won't tell all the details of what's going on. Meanwhile, the other stakeholders are kind of in the dark as to, they just think, oh yeah, so-and-so's running their program. They're great. They know what they're doing. They haven't said anything to us. And that dynamic seems to creep up in a lot of situations. And the OCC's role, in my opinion, anyway, that's what I started to learn, was their role was to try and make that a priority, that both sides know exactly what's going on, so that there's no gray areas. Is that accurate?
The short answer is yes.
Yeah, because it's a real barrier for teachers. I think that's the one thing. I know that you hear this a lot, is teachers will go, oh, there's just so much work to do. I want to take kids outside. I'd love to take them out to the mountains, but it's just so much work, and I don't want to have to go through all that work. And so most teachers, unfortunately, just go, I'm not even going to bother, right? It's too many things to do. They're not wrong. And I think that's kind of one of the issues here, is they're not technically wrong, right?
Absolutely. So part of the reason why I was silent a little while ago, and why I'm kind of stumbling on words right now, is there's so many angles worth mentioning here, and also
Hmm.
there's a ton of nuance, and so much of what you're saying is right. So here's a couple pieces I want to add to,
Yeah.
and I want to, yeah, I'll start here. One thought exercise that we're doing. So you're talking about like, the risk aversion that you find in multiple schools.
Hmm.
So one thought exercise that we're doing in the new course that we're currently piloting. So it's called the
Hmm.
Field Leader Supervisor. So that course, in a school
Oh.
context, for example, is a course designed specifically for school principals, or it could be
Mm.
school superintendents. It could also be for the risk management folks. I forget their title, but the
Mm.
listeners probably know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Um, within
In
the
any school division, I know exactly who you're talking about.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I forget the title, but anyway, the point is the course is for those people in those roles. And one of the
Mm.
thought exercise that we're doing, and I'm gonna butcher the details here because I don't have the resource in front of me, but it's essentially, would you use this device? And then I start. I say I because it's was one course I was teaching. You start describing something that weighs a ton, something that goes 5 times faster than what the human body has ever been able to do in hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. Something that kills, I forget the exact number, but it's something like around like 2,000 Canadians a year. You say, and ask a question, would you use this device for your students?
Mhm.
And then within the exercise, the thought exercise, like, I'm describing a car.
Mhm. Mm.
The reality that we experience in any aspect of our life, but including in schools, is that it's not that we're not exposing people to risk or deadly risk. We are. If
Mhm.
you're in a vehicle, you are exposed to a deadly risk to a certain level of probability. And some people, to the thousands of numbers every year from published by Statistics Canada, die from vehicles. What we have done, though, as a society is we've looked at vehicles and we have said they are worth it enough that we will create a structure around it to be able to use them in a way that is safe enough. And there's a
Mm.
bunch of mechanisms, from very concrete, evident functionality ones like a seatbelt or
Mm.
cars crumpling to disperse impact, to some systems that actually, when you think about it deeply, it's like, oh my God, we're trusting a lot. So I hope nobody will
Mhm.
lose sleep after what I'm saying. But have you ever thought about the social contract we all make by stopping at the red light? Imagine if all of us suddenly decided that this red light means nothing and we're going to do whatever we want.
Mhm.
Like that's just a common agreement that we all
Mhm.
have. Yeah, okay, the
Mhm.
cops help in keeping the agreement, but you get what I mean. And we trust vehicles enough to put kids are in cars. Why can we not do the same thing for outdoor education? Is there risk exposure? Yes, there is. And statistically, the risk exposure is lower than organized sports, even lower. I haven't looked at the latest statistics, but even lower than like soccer. There's a century of accepted practices on how to deliver a safe outdoor activity. There's well-known educational benefits to outdoor learning. The problem is that that knowledge is not available to the different individuals that have a ton of influence on the school system. Well, that's true in most provinces in the country. Like the Yukon is a clear exception. They've been doing outdoor learning since the 80s. Quebec is definitely on the quite integrated. BC has a huge amount of outdoor learning energy and whatnot. That's very encouraging. And for things to remain, no matter what the circumstances, it needs to be integrated within the system. Like we cannot continue to rely on passionate teachers to make things happen. That's how
Mhm.
we know that things exist for a little while and then they just disappear.
Yeah.
So that's one piece. The other piece I want to mention is, in regards to the too much work, is like, well, imagine yourself, if gymnasiums did not exist, and every time you have to like do phys ed, whatever, you have to like find your floor hockey sticks, you have to make new nets like every single time. Yeah, people would say phys ed is way too much work. Why would we teach hockey or whatever sport you want to choose here?
Mhm.
And it's kind of the same idea. We have invested a significant amount of energy and resources as a society to make sure that there's physical education in schools, which concretely means hundreds of thousands of dollars invested in building gymnasiums. They're not cheap, and we are maintaining them. We can also choose as a society to support outdoor learning. And when that support is within the school structure itself, then the actual workload on the individual teacher reduces significantly and is actually the return, the benefit you get from doing your job as a teacher to bring students outside outweighs the work that you have to do to bring them outside.
Mm.
But again, we can't keep on counting on passionate, amazing, dedicated teachers to make it happen in a long-term sustainable way. It has to be a change that is much more integrated than that.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm now reflecting on back when I was teaching, I I remember the OCC's at the time, their push was, hey, this has to happen from the ground up. This has to be the teachers that kind of bring it back to the administrators that bring it up. And now it seems like that's the shift that you're describing is there seems to be what you're saying, a target towards administrators now. Not just those passionate teachers, as you're saying, but now admin or the safety individuals that are within an organization, that's a newer target for the OCC. And I love that. I think that you're speaking my language here. Like this is what I absolutely think has needed to happen. And I think it's the right time for it. I also work for an organization. You probably familiar with Faces Education down in
Oh
Southern
no,
Alberta.
actually. No,
Okay.
well, not in, give me more information. I'm curious.
Yeah. Well, we had Albie come. This is back when I had taken my OCC training, and then we had
Yeah.
Albie Soul come down, and he helped get things going for Faces Education. And so now that I believe it's every 2 years, or 2 or 3 years, Faces offers a new field leader training course for the
Oh,
entire
cool, cool, cool,
organization.
cool. Okay.
Yeah, within Livingston Range, this is a great example actually of what you're talking about. Within Livingston Range, I want to say about 15, 20 years ago, they were facing a similar threat for their FACES program. FACES is now 25 years old. So yeah, I want to say 20 years ago, the insurance companies were going to Livingston Range School Division and saying, you can't run this program. And
Mm-hmm.
because within Livingston Range, within their administration, they had people like you're talking about who were advocates for the program
Yeah.
and for going outdoors. They said, "Well, thank you very much. We'll take it from here." And I think they ended up either finding another insurance or provider, or I can't remember what the situation. But anyway, it didn't shut the program down.
Yeah.
It has kept it going for 25 years through all the stuff that you're talking about, those incidents. Because I know the incident you're referring to in that happened in 2001 and 2003.
Mm-hmm.
Those, yeah, they rocked the outdoor world. But through all that, this company, anyway, it had to do with the administration. It was because the administration were strong advocates of the outdoors. And just like you said, the benefits of the outdoors was much higher than not having it. And especially the way that students and parents had latched onto the program, there was no way it was going to get shut down just because of the insurance companies. And so when the Outdoor Council of Canada stepped in, that just solidified their relationship with the administration. Now they felt like they were part of the team,
Mm-hmm.
um, and certainly able to oversee, those aspects and know that they were being done correctly. They Lots of changes happened within Faces. They started going with fully trained guides for all the activities. They really upped the professional level of how they
Mm-hmm.
approached everything, complete with plans of what happens in these situations, emergency backup plans. I would say probably a few near misses because I've been with Faces now for almost 15 years, so I've seen a lot of the changes, but lots of making sure everyone knows what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to spend or say a few words on the tragedies that happen in outdoor education, and I mean even beyond outdoor education. Just recently, about like 10 days ago, there's a tragedy in an avalanche here in Alberta. Those are events that do happen in outdoor activities. They are impossible to avoid. As long as there are outdoor activities, there will be a certain amount of those that turn into a tragedy. And every single one of them is for the families, for the loved ones. It's tragic. And I feel for them. And I'm not just saying that from external disconnected party. One of the tragedies in the early 2000s, the parents, the family of one of the youth that died, actually have been a very long-standing supporters of the OCC. They've joined our board in the early days.
Oh,
They are
wow.
still supporting the OCC financially for so that we can offer scholarships for our courses to individuals in our organization that might not have the means to get the certification. And they're very, very clear that the value, despite them losing their child, the value of outdoor education is such that it has to continue. Things have to be done across the board by applying the principles that we know work and will reduce the number of people that will get injured and that will suffer tragic events. And again, I'm going back to social choices. When you start to look for them, you can see our society is making choices in terms of risk exposure everywhere. And I'm going back to 2017 to the death in an outdoor trip in Ontario. Well, I think it was like 8 months later, there was the Humboldt accident,
Oh, yeah.
which was tragic. I think it was
Mhm.
17 young men in the prime of their life, a minor
Yes.
hockey team that died.
Yeah.
Well, there's not a single hockey team that stopped hopping on a bus to go from city to city to play a tournament in the worst season of the year the
Mhm.
day after. Nobody stopped it. Nobody
Mhm.
questioned doing that practice.
Mm,
What we
mm.
did is we came together as a country and we mourned and we celebrated those youth and I can't find a word in English right now, but really there was huge coming together. And truthfully, Canada sees hockey as important enough that we're going to continue doing these practices, which sometimes means national loss.
Mm.
I think it's upon each and every one of us in the outdoor community to hold, celebrate the value that we provide, but also recognize the implications of our choices and take them seriously, both practically when you're making a decision in the field, but also conceptually in terms of like understanding that we all share in the grief and we all share the load in keeping people safe.
Yeah. Oh, I love the analogies that you're using for this. These analogies work really well for me anyway, and I hope that the people listening get how those really help to paint that picture, because that's a great example of what Canada did. I know as a bus driver, it was temporarily harder to get bus driving licenses. That was about the only real shift that I saw. It was, more expensive, more I would say strenuous, the courses maybe,
Mhm.
but that was it. We didn't stop hockey. We didn't stop buses from going places. We, we might have suspected more, make sure that they log their hours a little bit better for bus drivers, and that's about it. But as you said, it didn't stop the program. And there's a knee-jerk reaction often, like you say. I think it's the optics often of these outdoor tragedies of what to do in those situations. And a friend that I knew fairly well, you're probably familiar with her. I won't include her name in the podcast. She died in an ice avalanche, climbing out to, oh, what was the climb she was on? It was out of the blue. It was not even the avalanche conditions were really good, and this massive ice avalanche came down the ice climb she was doing and killed her basically instantly. And she was a person who, in my books, she followed the rules. Like, she didn't,
Mhm.
if the conditions were bad, she wasn't out there digging snow pits to see if this spot was good, she was like, no, I'm not going. She was the kind of person who knew in detail what places would you could go that were safe and which was off limits. She was very good at, and yet, despite all of that, this tragedy happened. I look at that as an example for me of, anyway, is like that sometimes that stuff just happens. And when you do the debrief afterwards of why it might have happened, and you look for, are there ways that we could have improved, that's the key. That's what the OCC provides, is a structure, a framework to analyze those situations and to look at to what extent were we involving the right parties and making sure everyone was in the know, and did people cover their bases, not to find blame, but to learn from, and move forward, rather than go, what things do we
Yeah,
need to shut down now?
yeah, exactly. And thanks for saying the OCC has done that. And I want to qualify that a smidge.
Mm, please
So,
do.
as evident by our conversation, a portion of what it means to go outdoors, which includes experiencing tragedy or serious injury, it is a part of the reality. And because that reality is so impossible to ignore, the outdoor community got really, really good at developing practices that work to manage risk effectively. I just want to spend a few words on when you look at theories of risk management, particularly, let's say, in an industrial setting, risk management is very much, okay, I'm simplifying here, but it's like a list of steps and system control, which works fantastically fine in a factory setting. But factory settings are static environments to some extent. Outdoor environments are complex environments. They're ever changing. The weather is ever changing. How you feel as a leader is ever changing. Your group is ever changing. Everything. So it's a complex system.
Yeah.
And those risk management methodologies that are developed for industrial settings do not transpose well into outdoor settings. So the outdoor community got really, really, really good at developing effective tools over a long period of time. Now, I do want to acknowledge that humans being in nature is as whole old as human history. On this continent of Turtle Island, like, nations have been successful for 15 or 21,000 years, depending on where you put the beginning point. Here, I'm talking more about what we conceptualize as modern outdoor activities, which at the end of the day is a very settler colonial concept. But just to put in a historical context, I'm talking in about the last century, what we conceptualize as modern outdoor activities. There's a bunch of practices that were defined, and we got really good at it. And a lot of it relies on judgment, decision making. And that's where I'm coming to the place where you're saying that's what the OCC brings. Well, what the OCC has done is it has looked at what works in the outdoor community, what has been distilled over all that time, and it brought it into an easy to access and an affordable package.
Mm-hmm.
Easy to access package in an affordable manner with our courses, so that anybody can learn the foundations. And then with the foundations, you're able to, again, if I'm simplifying to the maximum, at the end of the day, with the foundations, you're able to answer the following question. And the question is, am I likely to have the skills to be able to handle what I'm about to get into?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if you say yes, great. And you do what you learn, like follow the steps.
Mm-hmm.
And if you say no, then either change your activity or hire somebody. And by just being able to better answer that question, you are eliminating so many issues. And not all of them are tragedy related. Sometimes,
Yeah.
like, annoying circumstances are enough to change your plans. so so
Yes.
and so that's really what the Outdoor Council did. It's like, we didn't invent anything. We just brought it together in an accessible package.
Yeah.
As you can see, I'm super passionate about this, so I can talk about it and go in so many different angles with all
Yeah.
of it. So sometimes if I, take a tangent, feel free to bring me back.
No, I love it. This is my passion as well. I'm definitely invested in trying to take away a lot of the barriers that prevent people from going outdoors. On my own like spiel that I give is like, in my opinion, there's three things that stop people. One is their knowledge of and skills and experience. It all kind of
Yep.
comes into one package. That's one thing. They don't
Yep.
have that, or they were never given it. The next is really their access to gear and assets within, you know, an organization. So like where they live and who they pal around with and the people that they, you know, associate with. That's another barrier. And then the third barrier is your habits. Like if you've got poor fitness habits or poor food habits or any of those things, those three things are, you know, you look at anything that prevents somebody from going outside, it's related to one of those three things, right? My own mission, what I do on my, I've got a number of YouTube channels. The Natural Classroom is one of them, but I'm a videographer and I have another channel that I my goal is to provide content that helps people to address those issues as best as I can through a video format. The OCC, in my opinion, is taking care of a little bit of all three of those things, but really the knowledge part for sure, and the understanding of who to connect with, the, you know, the assets or the people, the access to information.
And thanks. I appreciate again that you related to the OCC, and I want to be explicit that it's not just us. Like our motto
Mm,
is
mm,
partners in leadership, and I take that seriously. I'm gonna make a little bit of a parenthesis here. Like so much of what informs decisions made within the organization, as best as we can, is informed by how do you do a good outdoor trip. So when and I miss those days, and I'm hoping I can create a reality where I can go back into the on trail with a group.
mm,
But when I was on trail with a group, you know, I might be the instructor or whatever title you give me. I might be the one that has specific knowledge that the group need. At the end of the day, everybody in the group is needed for the experience to be a quality one. That's the same thing for the outdoor community in Canada. I don't really know why, but we seem to have had for a long time a tradition of competition between outdoor organizations.
yeah, yeah.
We're experts at delivering those like hugely connective experiences where, you know, you and I go on a trip together led by somebody else, and we get to know each other in a deep way and be friends and see each other years later and be like, oh, it's good to see you. But
Mm.
then if you and I go back behind our computer and then we're like, oh, like you're the paddling organization, I'm the hiking. Oh, those paddlers are, you know, why is it that once we get behind our computers, suddenly this
Mm.
other outdoor organization is the competition, where really we're all about community building,
Ooh, yeah.
right? Like it's so much of part of the reason of what we do, why we do what we do. So yeah, I want to be explicit here. The Outdoor Council of Canada is not accomplishing its mission alone. We're accomplishing it in community. We see
Mm.
ourselves as being able to pull on a few levers that others are unable to,
Mhm.
and then make it easier for them. But we also see them being able to do levers that we can't touch. So just in education, for example, Take Me Outside.
Mm, mhm.
They are Canada's most effective outdoor education awareness campaign. The Outdoor Council of Canada would never be able to do a campaign as effective as Take Me Outside. And we need Take Me Outside. You
Yeah.
know, other partners of ours, the Outdoor Learning Store, they
Yeah.
not only do they have a great selection of resources for educators, they also bring together probably the Canada's biggest community of outdoor outdoor educators, outdoor learning educators. And with their outdoor learning national outdoor learning conference, which is the second edition this year, like they're on fire, you know,
Mm.
learning for a sustainable future, teaching about sustainability, the land, and helping us create more of a future that is healthy through outdoor education.
Mhm.
Physical Health Education Canada, that sees outdoor education into physical and health education.
Mm.
And you know that they're a trusted organization within the broader education professional community.
Yeah.
So it's not just the OCC; it's all of us coming together, just like we do on trail.
Yes. Oh, this is I'm like excited that you're saying this, because that's really, when I made this podcast, that was really my part of the goal. Was I want to break down a lot of the barriers that exist, and a lot of it, the work's already been done. But I think by promoting the outdoors through interviewing different organizations, everyone gets that sense that we're all on the same team. Really, we're all we're all rooting for the same, outcomes
Yeah.
here. Just like you say, on the trail, we can have those conversations, and we all, whoa, we realize how very similar we are, on the trail. And then we get to our organizations, and we're like, oh, ours is better than.
Yeah.
We want to get rid of that for sure. And I love that you brought that up. Just in the interest of time, we have to wrap up here in 2 minutes. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
Well, I got
Um,
7 minutes, but
oh, 7 minutes? Okay.
yeah.
Okay. That's good to know. I think what I'd like to maybe end things with here is maybe just your final thoughts on what directions do you see, do you think that outdoor education still needs to make progress in? And what are some of the ways that the OCC is going to be addressing that?
Well, you're asking me to predict the future. And if there's one thing, there's a cheeky saying, but people that specialize in predicting the future, and it's something like you can predict everything except what the future is. I'm seeing a bunch of trends,
Mm,
and trends come and go. And what I'm hoping is that some things that are trends right now remain because they're part of the social structure.
mm,
And I'm also hoping that some probabilities do not happen because the consequences could be quite negative. So
mm.
I want you to keep that in mind as I talk about the future, because I
Okay.
see trends. Yeah, more people want to go outside. Outdoor learning is on the boost. That's
Mm,
great. Like I see it in multiple places in the country. There are more people. Like, I mean, even the Canadian School Board Association, I believe, or
okay.
one of those national association had a conference last year that they were talking about outdoor learning. So that's encouraging.
Yeah. Yeah.
Concurrently, if it doesn't become part of teacher training programs, if it doesn't become part of awareness of administrators and their responsibility in regards to outdoor learning, it's going to remain on the shoulders of passionate teachers. And A, the advancement there is going to be slower than what it could be. B, it creates a very vulnerable system.
Mm.
There are provinces in this country that are one tragedy away from losing outdoor learning,
Uh,
losing all the progress that was made since, let's say, the pandemic hit and people were like, I need to go outside. And that's not okay. Like, we need to create something more resilient than cross your fingers and hope for the best. Because again, the question is not will an accident happen in a school or will a death happen? We know it will eventually. The question is when it happens, how can we be there as a community, provide support to those affected directly in their personal life and whatnot, and B, also be able to reassure decision makers as like, no, this is worth it, and it can continue to be safe and whatnot. And then in regards of what the OCC is doing for that, well, that is where, so all the organizations I've mentioned, we are part of a coalition that focuses specifically on supporting school administrators.
mhm.
So yeah, our field leader courses and with the focus for the teachers, and then all our partners that offer resources to teachers, but then the field leader supervisor and all the developing resources for administrators. And then I won't go into details right now because the planning is still in early stages, but education is provincial in nature. So we want to engage with provincial partners so that they can do springboard from all those resources and support to do some meaningful outreach in their province, and also
Mm.
using the gains that have been done in Quebec and the how outdoor learning is established in the Yukon as kind of frameworks when they engage in their own province.
Oh, cool.
Because the question is not like, can we invent that wheel? The wheel
Hmm.
exists. It's just like in
Hmm.
our province, what are we going to do? So we go roam on with that wheel.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I'm glad there is there's something in place that's like you say, you can't predict the future, and it's hard to guess at what's going to happen. But I feel pretty confident based on what you're saying that I agree with, the direction that you're taking, or your proactive approach to where this might go, and to see that to its end. So I'm looking forward to keeping up with the OCC and hearing what the OCC continues to do. And then, like I say, I'll be chatting with other people as well about their involvement with the OCC. And I hope people that listen to this see the value that the OCC provides for both teachers, administrators, students, even in an outdoor setting. So
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for the invite. And I do want to mention to listeners, if you have any questions about outdoor learning, feel free to contact us. Nathan, I don't know if you give the contact info, but I'm sure
I'll
you
put
have
it
a
on the
way
screen
of.
right now.
Perfect, perfect. We might not have the answer, but we are probably going to be able to connect you to the organization that can provide the answer, or that you want to connect with, because again, it's us together. I haven't mentioned everybody that's operating in that domain.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, super excited to see what's possible in Canada, because we are a country with unique outdoor spaces, and
Mm-hmm.
we can really tie that to education in powerful ways.
Cool. Well, thanks, Franz, for being willing to do this with me and be on the podcast. It's been fun,
You're welcome.
very informative, and yeah, thanks for everything that you and the OCC does for outdoor education.
Well, you're most welcome, and yeah, have fun editing, and I'm looking forward to hear more about your podcast.
Awesome. Okay. Well, take care.
You too. Ciao, ciao.
Okay. Bye.